Today we're going to look at finding GST and PST. And really when we're finding GST and PST, essentially what we're doing is just finding percent of a number. So GST, that stands for Goods and Services Tax. And that Goods and Services Tax is on basically everything new that you buy that isn't something that is essential or important. Like if you go to the grocery store and you're buying fruits and vegetables, you don't get charged GST on that. But if you buy chips and pop, you will get taxed on that. Okay, so when we're looking at goods and services tax, it's on anything kind of that's manufactured or made and then purchased as new. Now, when we're looking at PST, that's a provincial sales tax. And currently in Alberta, we do not have a provincial sales tax, okay? So when you're working on questions and you're thinking about our context in Alberta, you will use 0% for the provincial sales tax because we don't have one. But because of that, I will often ask you to consider something in another province, okay? So if I was looking to find the amount of GST added onto an item that costs $57, GST in Canada right now is always 5%. Okay, so whenever I talk about GST, it's always 5%. So if I want to find the amount of GST added onto the item that costs $57, what I really want to know is what is 5% of $57? Okay, and so what I'm going to do to find this is I'm going to change my 5%. I'm going to rewrite that as its decimal equivalent, 0.05. I'm going to write that word of as a multiplication because of in math means multiply. And then I'm going to keep the price as $57. Now it's 57.00. Those zeros don't change anything, so I'm just going to write it as 57. So I go 0.05 times 57, and that gives me a total of, that would be $2.85. Okay, so the GST, the extra tax that I have to pay on top of the cost of that item is $2.85. Now the last part here says what is the total cost. Okay, so the total cost is going to take my original $57 and it's going to add on the 5% GST. So I'm going to add on that $2.85 to my $57, and in total the whole thing will cost me $59.85 to buy it. Okay, so that's the total cost. So if I'm just finding the GST, I want to find 5% of the number. If I'm looking for the total cost, I take my original price, I add on the GST, and I simply add them together. Okay? Now, that's something to keep in mind. If I'm actually not asking you how much is the GST, so let's say I don't ask this part where I say find the amount of GST added onto an item. If I got rid of that and I just said what is the total cost, anytime you buy something new, I have to take that $57 and I have to add 5% on. So I want you to think about this. On the last slide, I said we took our $57 and then we added on $2.85. And what we really did was we took our original cost, which was 100%. Okay, we have to pay the whole amount. We have to pay that 100%. And then we're adding 5% extra. Okay, so when I add that 5% extra, what ends up happening now that we know about percents that are bigger than 100 is my new cost is actually 105% of the original cost. So I'm going to show you this trick. If I wanted to find 105% of $57, I'm going to do the same thing where I change my 105, I write it as its decimal equivalent, which is 1.05. We change the of to be multiply, and then the 57 stays as the 57. And 1.05 times 57 actually ends up giving me 59.85, which is exactly what this did here. Okay, so if you don't need to state what the GST is separately, if you don't have to state it separately, you can combine your percentages together, where the 100% is the original price, Okay, so we've got our 100% is the original cost, and that 5% is the tax being added on. Okay, that's the extra tax. So in total, I have to pay 105% of the item's cost, right? The 100 keeps the original portion, the 5% adds on my 5% tax, so I have to pay in total 105% of what it costs. So if you don't need to find the GST separately, there's a way you can cheat. Okay, so let's look at this one. Find the amount of GST added onto an item that costs $124.75. So again, that's 5% of $124.75. So I'm going to find the GST separately here. So when I find the GST, I'm going to, oh, sorry, I picked the wrong color. I'm going to, ooh, don't clear everything. Come on. I'm going to take the 5% and write it as its decimal equivalent. I'm going to change of to be multiply, and then I'm going to keep my value the same, $124.75, and I'm going to multiply these two things together. When I multiply them together, that gives me $6.2375. Now this looks a little bit awkward because we're talking about money. Since we're talking about money, I want to write it in dollars and cents. And cents, we always stop at this decimal place right here. Okay, so that 3 is actually the last number I'm going to write. So because I want this to be the last number I write, I look at my neighbor, and so right now I'm looking at this grouping 37. 37 would be closer to 40 than it would be to 30. So when I round this one, I write it as 6.24 because 3's neighbor on the right tells me to round up to my next value instead of rounding down and keeping it at 3. So remember, anything between 5 to 9, we round up. Okay, so we would write it as $6.24. Okay, and then what is the total cost? So the total cost of everything altogether was $124.75, and then we're going to add on that $6.24 of tax for a total of $130.99. Okay, so that would be the final cost after tax. Now, an equivalent way of doing this same question is I could have gone 1.05 times 124.75, where I simply have the 1 in front because the 1 keeps my original price at 100%. The 0.5 adds on 5% tax for me, and if you multiply those two things together, you are still going to find that you get this same answer when rounded. Okay? So let's pretend now that we live in a different province. So if we went west of us into BC, there is a 7% PST in British Columbia. So they have to pay an extra 7% on these different items. Okay, so they have a GST and a PST. So what I would need to do is I would need to find 5% of $24, and I would also need to find 7% of $24. Okay, so I would change my 5% into that 0.05. I'm likewise going to change the 7% into 0.07. The of in both of them changes to times, and the 24 for both will just move down. Okay, so for my GST, I end up paying, for this one it's $1.20, and for the PST, 0.07 times 24 would give me $1.68. So in total, my taxes now, with the 5% and the 7%, my tax in total is $2.88. Now notice, when I took the tax, I found 5% of 24 and 7% of 24. Taxes are always on this price. I don't tax on top of a tax. So taxes are always going to be on the cost of the item. Okay? So if I look at adding everything all together, so I had $24 plus $1.20 for the GST plus $1.68 for my PST, and in total that gives me $26.88 is the final cost of my item. Now I want you to think about this in terms of percentages. I have my original item, which was 100%. I have GST, which was 5%, and I had PST, which was 7%. So really, I took my original cost, which was 100%, I added a 5% GST, and I added a 7% PST. In total, I'm now paying 112% of my original cost. So just as something fun on the side, take 112% of 24 and see if you get the same answer. You probably should. Now, something to keep in mind, I don't technically think they call it PST anymore. So what we're allowed to do, if I don't need to find them separately and I just wanted to find how much tax there is, because I pay a 5% GST and I pay a 7% PST, they are combined into what we call a 12% HST. So you'll often see that if you do travel to British Columbia, you'll see that you're paying a 12% HST, which stands for Harmonized Sales Tax. Okay, and it really is just combining both the GST and the PST together. Okay, now different provinces have different tax rates. So if we were to go east of us into Ontario, they have an 8% PST. So with this one here, if I got to find the GST and PST, so again, I got to find 5% of my cost here is $72, and I'm going to need to find 8% of $72. Okay, I'm going to leave it to you to calculate those two things separately if you want. I'm going to go around and just show you the total cost. So the total cost, I know I have to pay my total cost, which is 100%, and I know I have to pay my GST, which is going to add 5% more, and I know I'm going to have to pay my PST, which is going to add 8% more. So in total, I have to pay 113% of what this item actually costs. So if I was to take 113% of my $72, that's change that 113 into its decimal equivalent, 1.13, change of to times, and then 72 stays as 72. If I was to multiply those together, I get $81.36. Now, if you found the GST separately, it would be $3.60. If you found the PST separately, it's $5.76. Add that together, you get $9.36. When you add that to 72, it gives you $81.36. So we can find everything separately, and all we are doing when we find them separately is just finding percent of a number. However, we are allowed now to add some things together and combine some of our percentages. So that's how we would find GST or PST, and if you're in a neighboring province, how you are looking at finding HST, that Harmonized Sales Tax.